Hey everybody. In this lecture, we're going to continue talking about part two of Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. In particular, his attempt at arriving at moral perfection. In the last lecture, we talked about Franklin's bold and arduous attempt to arrive at moral perfection, a kind of literal moral perfection. Franklin committed himself to committing no fault at any time for the rest of his life. But as I talked about, Franklin admitted this was harder than he initially imagined it was going to be. It wasn't going to be enough just to, on the spot, commit to this moral perfection. He was going to have to break certain bad habits and replace those bad habits with positive habits if he was genuinely going to arrive at moral perfection. And so he realized, the first thing he realized he was going to need to do was to understand exactly what he meant by moral perfection. What would that even entail? And so, as we would expect from Benjamin Franklin, he decided to hit the books. He decided to do some studying. So many of the stories from part one in the autobiography started with Franklin saying one day, I was reading a book, and in the book it said such and such and such. So unsurprisingly, Franklin decided, okay, let me read some books, let me do some studying, and let me try to better understand what morality is all about. And so in the process of his study, he arrived at 13 moral virtues he considered to be essential. That if he was going to arrive at moral perfection, he was going to have to master these 13 things. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the 13 virtues is what he placed on the list and what he didn't place on the list. Expect a discussion question on this issue of what's on the list and what's not on the list. Because there's some, I think a lot of people would admit, it seems like there's some pretty glaring omissions in Franklin's list of 13 virtues. And there's some odd choices about what is on the list, which begs the question sort of what's going on with this list. And by the time we're done with the list, maybe we'll consider a little bit about maybe what's at play with Franklin's list of 13 virtues. Now, in fairness to Franklin, he was trying to create a workable plan of arriving at moral perfection. Can we all nitpick and say this should have been on the list and that should have been on the list? Yeah, of course we can. And if Benjamin Franklin was listening to my lecture on this and me nitpicking what's on and not on the list, he might say, give me a break. Give me a break. I had to come up with a workable list. I can't create a list with 500 virtues on it. It would be too unmanageable. I was trying to create something practical. To which, fair enough. But it's still interesting what's on the list and what's not on the list here. So he comes up with his 13 virtues, and as he lists them in the autobiography, he lists them in what he tells us, in what order he conceived you needed to master them, that he needed to master them. There's a certain progressive quality to it. You need to master this before you can really go on. Or if you don't master this one, you're not going to be able to master something lower on the list. All right? So let's start taking a look at these. Franklin not only gives us the one-word virtue in these 13 virtues, but he also gives us a little aphorism, a little saying to go along with this. Franklin was famous for these aphorisms. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. That's a more interesting way of saying, hey, go to bed early, wake up early. You'll be a more productive human being, right? A penny saved is a penny earned. That's a more interesting poetic way of encouraging people to save money and not waste it. So, not surprisingly, to help us better understand each of these virtues, he has a little commentary about each one. So, number 1 on the list, temperance. Eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. I just noticed this list. I just Googled a list of the 13 virtues to put on there. It's also got a little commentary on here that I didn't notice. I actually just kind of liked the font of the 13 virtues and didn't look that hard. I hope they're correct. Yeah, that one looks okay. All right, let's continue. Franklin tells us this was not a big issue for him. He wasn't much of a drinker. We've already discussed this before, so maintaining temperance wasn't a big issue for him. However, it's the number 1 on the list. You know, if you cannot maintain sobriety, if you are getting drunk, you are going to make bad decisions. If you are going to master the next 12, you're going to need to be sober to do it. So this is number 1 on the list. Okay. He also includes food in here. Eat not to dullness. It's interesting. Today, when we think of overeating, we think of it almost exclusively in terms of being bad for our health or weight gain. But through most of human history, you are encouraged not to overeat in terms of saving. Don't eat all your food today because then you won't have anything else to eat tomorrow. Food was difficult to come by and it was scarce throughout a lot of human history. So don't consume too much today. Save, don't eat too much. You're going to starve tomorrow. Okay. Number 2, silence. Speak not but what may benefit others or yourself. Avoid trifling conversation. Now, as we're going to look when we get done talking about this, Franklin has a chart in which he tracked how well he was doing on a weekly basis for each of these. And he admits, and we'll see on the chart, he had no problem with temperance. That wasn't an issue for him, per se. But silence was. Ben was a talker. Ben liked the sound of his voice. And so he sometimes talked too much. Whenever I think of this, I could imagine Benjamin Franklin in his workshop and people coming in and customers coming in, and Ben probably wanting to talk to people, talk to authors, talk to the interesting people that came in, and maybe Ben neglecting some of his work because he was spending too much time talking. I suspect that's what he's talking about was an issue. Okay. Number 3, he also tells us he had some problems with number 3. Order. Let all things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. Franklin tells us that when he was a young man, he had a very good memory. And therefore, because of his good memory, he could kind of be disorganized and get away with it. He could leave papers in a place, and then, a few days later when he needed to find that paper, he had a very sharp memory. And he could just go to that place and find those papers, no problem. But Ben admits, as he's writing part 2 in his late 70s, his mind isn't quite as sharp. And because he didn't really cultivate order to the extent he needed to earlier in life, now he's kind of paying the price. Now he'll leave papers just someplace. And then a few days later, he'll go to look for them, and now, he can't quite remember. And so he wastes a bunch of time looking for stuff. Instead of developing more orderly habits in which you realize, like, oh, I leave all papers in this place. And so therefore, the only thing I need to remember is where's the place I keep all my papers, which would be relatively easy to remember. But Ben admits he didn't develop this habit enough. And so to this day, it's something he struggles a bit with. Resolution. Resolve to perform what you ought, perform without fail what you resolve. Okay? If you're going to say you're going to do something, do it. If you commit to doing something, commit to it. Okay? Pretty straightforward on that one. Next couple were really important ones. that we saw a lot of examples of Franklin emphasizing in part 1 of the autobiography. And one of the ways we can see sort of what's important to Franklin is his little saying afterward. How much wiggle room does he give us? How much latitude does he give us? You notice for the next two, he doesn't give us a lot of latitude. Frugality, saving money, not waste. To be frugal is to not waste money. Make no expense but to do good to others or yourself. For example, waste nothing. All right, waste nothing. He's not giving us a lot of latitude here. Save, make no expense except to do good to others or yourself. Okay, saving was really important for Ben. This was how he built his fortune. His ability to delay gratification, to not spend money on stuff he wanted as quickly as it came in, but rather save money, was important for Franklin. It's something he very much encourages us to maintain. So frugality was really important for Ben. Number 6 on the list, industry. Hard work. Lose no time. Be always employed in something useful. Cut off all unnecessary action. Wow. See, he gives us very little wiggle room there. Very little latitude there. We can tell this is a really important virtue for Benjamin Franklin, is hard work. When I talked about the idea of equality, and that nowhere in the autobiographies does Franklin make some grand pronouncement about all humans being equal. But I make the argument, and by the way, I'm not the only one who's picked up on this in the autobiography. Lots of people have noticed this who've read the autobiography, is that the way Franklin is presenting himself is in a way that allows us, the reader, to imagine we could do many of the things that he is also doing. And that's because he's working hard. We can all try to work harder. We can all commit to doing a little bit more. We can save. We can try to be more disciplined. We can try to make better decisions. And industry is high on the list. And in fact, industry and frugality, Franklin very much saw as being part of the same thing. Doesn't do you much good to work really hard, to earn money, and then if you spend that money so quickly, you're broke by the end of your paycheck and you've got nothing saved. What's the point? Okay, and you're not going to save a lot if you don't work hard to accumulate money. So hard work and saving sort of go hand in hand. That's where his aphorism, a penny saved is a penny earned. Okay, you can work hard and earn a penny, but you can also be careful with your money and not waste money. And that's almost like you earned another penny because you didn't waste it. They're kind of flip sides of the same coin. And in fact, Franklin would encourage you to do both. Hey, why not work hard, earn a penny, and save a penny? And at the end of the day, you got 2 instead of 0. Okay. Number 7, sincerity. Now this is an interesting one because this one, he actually does give us some wiggle room. You notice the last one, industry. Lose no time. Be always employed in something useful. Cut off all unnecessary action. Notice how many 100% words there were in there. All, always. Now look at how much wiggle room, look at how much latitude we have with number 7 in sincerity. All right? Use no hurtful deceit. Think innocently and justly, and if you speak, speak accordingly. All right. Did Franklin just tell us to never tell a lie? Actually, no, he did not. He said, use no hurtful deceit. Hurtful is the key word in there. He didn't tell us to never lie. One of the things that people have noticed about Franklin's list of virtues is this very idea of wiggle room with some of them. All right. So for the really important ones to him personally, like hard work, he doesn't want to give us a lot of latitude. But others like sincerity, Franklin seems to be recognizing a certain reality in the lived world that we occupy, which is it'd be pretty damn impossible to never tell a lie. Pretty hard, right? Often in life, we use a lot of little, what we might call white lies to make social life almost possible, okay? Somebody gets a new haircut. It looks really bad. It's a funny haircut. They got butchered. But you don't want to be rude. You don't want to be mean. Pointing out the ugly nature of the haircut at this point serves no positive good. Maybe this person is your employer, and so to tell the truth might risk something, or at least you fear so. So you tell a little white lie. Hey boss, I like your haircut. Looks really nice. That was not a hurtful deceit. In fact, it was actually the opposite. Trying to avoid hurting this person, you lie to that person. Okay. Benjamin Franklin would be 100% cool with that. He would probably agree with that decision you're making. So it's interesting. You know, if thou shall never tell a lie was the virtue, the problem with that, Ben would say, is it's so unrealistic that it provides no useful criteria for how you could go through life. You know, if I can't tell a lie, if you tell me I can't tell a lie, I'm just going to ignore that, because there are just going to be awkward situations occurring all the time in society in which truth would be painful and problematic. And so therefore, I'm going to avoid that with just little white lies. Okay. But Ben thinks he's given us a useful criteria, which is hurtful. As long as you're not trying to deceive a person in a hurtful way, it's okay to use these little white lies. It's all right. Hey boss, I like your haircut. Who's that hurting? That's not hurting anybody. In fact, you're trying to avoid a hurtful situation. Franklin's like, hey man, these little white lies are probably the grease that allows society continue. The day that we all start telling everybody the truth in all situations, we're all going to get fired from our jobs. We are all going to lose our relationships with the person that we're married to or dating, because we're going to say some horrible, truthful thing that serves no purpose. Do I look fat in these jeans? Yes, you look fat in those jeans. Suddenly I'm broken up. So it's interesting. Sometimes people have admired Franklin's list of virtues because some of them he seems to understand that to be useful, virtues have to exist in a real world that we live in. And so Franklin thinks this definition of sincerity he's giving us is one that we can really practically use and commit to in the real world. Okay. All right. Number 8, justice. Wrong none by doing injury or omitting the benefits that are your duty. Okay. Justice. All right. Don't hurt people. That one's pretty straightforward. Number 9, moderation. Moderation is sometimes referred to as the golden mean. It is some have argued, like Aristotle, it's the single most important virtue, because if you maintain moderation, many of the bad things you do come from extreme actions. And if you avoid extreme actions, you'll probably be okay. Think of temperance, number 1 on the list. Okay, drink not, or eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Again, going back to what we were just talking about, latitude and wiggle room. Ben never said you can never have a drink. He said drink not to elevation. You can drink, but once you start feeling yourself getting high from that drink, okay, stop. Okay. If you are moderate, you're not going to have a problem with alcohol. Okay. If you are moderate in how much you speak, number 2 on the list, you are not going to have an issue. All right. So moderation solves a lot of problems. Okay. Avoid extremes. Forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. To forbear means to put up with. Put up with. Like don't resent slights against you so much that you freak out. Okay. Best example of this is driving a car and road rage. Somebody cuts you off while you're driving, forbear. Okay, put up with it. Okay, don't go pull a baseball bat out of the back seat and start swinging it outside the car. Okay, somebody made a mistake, they cut you off. Guess what? You have cut other people off when you're driving. I guarantee you have. Whether you meant it or not, you've done it if you drive. And so therefore, how would you want somebody to react to you if you accidentally cut somebody off? Pull out a baseball bat and start driving, tailgating you? No, of course not. Forbear. All right? Avoid extremes. Okay? Number 10 is an interesting one. Cleanliness. Tolerate no uncleanliness in body, clothes, or habitations. Now, remember, this is supposed to be a list of moral virtues. Morality. And Franklin puts on his list cleanliness? Don't get me wrong. I woke up this morning, I took a shower, I slapped some deodorant on, I brushed my teeth. I'm not questioning the importance of cleanliness. When I walk into a classroom I'm teaching in, I hope most of you have bathed and that you don't all funk up the room when I walk in there, because that would be quite distracting. But it begs the question, at what point does cleanliness move from just a good idea or a good habit to a moral issue? My friends, I'm asking you, how bad does somebody have to smell for it to become a moral issue? Like, this dude smells so bad, I am in physical pain. We'll come back to this one because it gets to the issue of what might really be going on with Benjamin Franklin's list. It's a curious thing to have on there, on a list of moral virtues, cleanliness. This isn't a list of good habits. This is supposed to be about arriving at moral perfection. Okay. Through the history of humanity, some of the most moral, kind, and decent people, quite frankly, probably didn't bathe a lot in history. So, frankly, I don't know how much cleanliness has to do with morality. But we'll return to it. Tranquility. Be not disturbed at trifles or accidents, common or unavoidable. Tranquility. Again, straightforward. Kind of almost has a little bit of echo of moderation, doesn't it? Kind of sounds similar to that. But nonetheless, tranquility. Try to maintain a serene, tranquil life. Number 12, chastity. Rarely use venery. Okay, venery is a very old-timey word for sex. Okay, it was an old-timey word for sex in the 18th century. Okay. Rarely used sex, venery, but for health or offspring, never to dullness, weakness, or the injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. One of the things that's interesting about this was this chastity very much falls into the category of do as I say, not as I do. Remember part 1 was written for Franklin's son that was born to a woman other than his wife. And Franklin was notoriously famous for not being faithful to his wife. Franklin This is not something that Franklin practiced consistently during his life, but nonetheless, he encourages us to modulate our sex, never to dullness, weakness. What he says, however, but for health, which there's a very modern ring to what Franklin is saying. He understands sex as being part of a healthy life. And it's interesting. It almost sounds modern when he says, rarely use veterinary sex, but for health or offspring. Interesting. But not to the injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. He would be particularly thinking about a young woman, that what damage that could do to a woman's reputation of having premarital sex. And then finally, 13, the last. And remember, he told us there was a certain progressive order he believed to these 13 virtues. Number 1 on the list, temperance. If you can't stay sober, you're not going to be able to follow on the list. Now, number 13 is humility. Franklin imagined the last stumbling block that you would face if you arrived at moral perfection would be to want to start bragging about how you arrived at moral perfection, not shutting up about how you are morally perfect, demeaning other people because they are flawed and you, the special one, are morally perfect. So your last obstacle would be to be humble. Okay, you've arrived at moral perfection. Now, don't talk about it. Don't brag about it. Don't think it makes you better than, or at least probably does make you better than other people, but don't throw it in other people's faces. Maintain your humility. And so for his saying, imitate Jesus and Socrates. Okay, what's so humble about those two people? Well, if Christians are right, Jesus Christ allowed himself to be crucified. The Son of God allowed mortal humans to crucify and kill him for the sins of mankind. Sounds pretty humble to me. And remember when we talked about the Socratic method and Socrates, and that Socrates would walk around ancient Athens saying, I know nothing? Remember, Socrates believed the big problem with people in gaining knowledge was that they already thought they had the answers, and therefore they weren't willing to learn new things. And so Socrates would tell people, I know nothing. I know nothing. He was humble, or at least taking on the pose of humility by saying, I know nothing. I'm here to learn. He was humble. Okay, those were the people we were supposed to imitate. Okay, I don't have it drawn up here, but let me draw it up here. Franklin's daily schedule. Yeah, let's find one of these. Yeah, this looks like it was exactly reprinted in your book here. Okay, so Franklin comes up with his 13 virtues. And like we said, he needed a method to help arrive at this moral perfection. So not only did he come up with his 13 virtues, oh, this is his daily schedule. Okay, well, I'll just talk about this first, and we'll get back to his 13 virtues. And so he reprinted for us in part 2 his daily schedule. So every morning he would wake up and have a sort of saying of the day, his question of the day. What good shall I do? All right. And then after waking up at 5 in the morning, he would rise, wash, address powerful goodness, contrive the day's business, and take the resolution of the day, prosecute the present study and breakfast. Okay, a lot of that's straightforward. Rise, wash, address powerful goodness. What does that mean? Notice that it's italicized and goodness is capitalized. Pray. That was Franklin's sort of enlightenment way of saying he would pray in the morning. Okay. As we've learned, Franklin was not a conventional religious believer. And so therefore, just the idea of rise, wash, pray maybe doesn't accurately depict how he wanted to be viewed. And so instead, rise, wash, and address powerful goodness. Contrive the day's business. He would think about what he was going to do for the day. Take what was the resolution of the day? What good shall I do today? And then breakfast. All right. Then he would work, get a nice 2-hour lunch break. During his lunch break, he would read, look over his accounts for his business. He would eat. He would get back to work. He would finish work at 6 o'clock. And then have the rest of the evening to himself, where he would put things in their places, tidy up, supper, music, diversion, conversation. And then he had a question in the morning, and he would have a question in the evening, but now in past tense. What good have I done today? I think this was Franklin's last attempt. If he realized, when he asked himself this question, the answer was nothing. Maybe he had a little more time to do something good for that day. All right. And so that was his daily schedule. Many people have admired Franklin's daily schedule for what it offered readers. Something for us to copy. Okay. Yeah, here we go. This is what we're looking for. Move me over here. So this is also reprinted in your book. It'll be in any version of the autobiography. This became Franklin's method for arriving at moral perfection. You notice across there are the initials for the days of the week, starting with Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, etc. And then going down vertically, you have the first initial of the 13 virtues: temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, and etc. Okay. Now, what Franklin committed himself is to working on a different 13 virtue for 1 week at a time and mark whenever he messed up. So we talked about temperance. He didn't have much of a problem, and you'll notice there are no marks on temperance. He was good with that. Silence, for the next week, he had problems with that, Ben, and he admitted to it. He talked too much. And so you'll see, in fact, the first Sunday, multiple marks, 2 of them, he messed up. Order, he also had problems with, and we see more marks there. Right? And then he would go through all 13. And then he would start over on the 14th week. He would start right up at the top of the list with temperance again, and just keep going through this list. One of the reasons I suspect there were 13 virtues and not 12 or 14 or something is that 13 is perfectly divisible into 52. 4 times 13 is 52. Franklin could go over his 13 virtues exactly 4 times a year and start all over again. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but Franklin liked symmetry. Franklin liked even things. So maybe that's the reason why there's a number divisible neatly into 52. And he would just start all over again. And his hope was, as time would go on, as he was breaking bad habits and cultivating good habits, there would be fewer and fewer check marks on the list, until eventually there would be none, and he would keep working and there would be none, until the point where he would have hoped he doesn't even have to follow this list anymore, because he just knows he has arrived at moral perfection. Franklin, however, admits he never arrived at moral perfection. It just never happened. Okay. He said he became a better person and it was worth the endeavor, and that's one of the reasons why he talks about it so much. But nonetheless, he did not arrive at moral perfection. But he thinks we should try, and we should commit to being better people. But he did not achieve that. Maybe those old Puritans were right about all of this. Okay, everybody. That's good enough for this lecture. We're going to stop here. I'll see you next time. Bye.